Hello, my name is Nathan Heater. I'm a junior here at Mount Union, and my major is exercise science. Today I'm going to be talking about water shortages versus the world, and I want to note that I'm going to be skipping some of these slides because my partner is going to be asking these questions or answering his side of the portion of the presentation whenever we give the presentation. Okay, so some of the things that we're going to be talking about today are the key factors, our reasoned in defense, our counter-argument, our water shortage solutions, conclusions, and then our references. So my partner is going to be asking the questions to the class. How much water am I actually using? How much is wasted, and what can I change? And then he's going to be asking, have you ever thought that you may be contributing to a bigger picture of water shortages? Water shortages can be described as a lack of sufficient water resources, including a lack of access to safe water supplies that meets a standard within a given region. Water shortages are important because there's things like climate changes, natural disasters, war and conflict, water waste, lack of infrastructure, lack of international cooperation on shared water resources, inequality and imbalance of power, and forced migration and the refugee crisis. So I'm going to be explaining what each of these basically represent or why they're contributing to water shortage. Climate change is a big problem. It usually affects places that are already in scarcity of water already. So for example, a third world country, they're facing water shortage problems already, and climate change is just going to be making this worse because of the effects of it. Climate change is basically getting worse because of the greenhouse gas emissions that are produced from transportation, heat in buildings and houses and stuff like that, electricity, mining. So for mining materials like cobalt or lithium or something like that, that causes a lot of CO2 production because you need a lot of gasoline, like generators, drills, etc., that use these fossil fuels that then produce greenhouse gas emissions, and then making our climate change worse, and then it makes the water shortages become more serious as well. Natural disasters are another big thing. Natural disasters can wipe out an entire community's water resources by contaminating the water or damaging the infrastructure of a city or a community. Natural disasters are often made worse because of climate change. The more that climate change becomes a problem, the more natural disasters will become a problem. If you look at Hurricane Ian last September of 2022 has caused millions and millions of damage. And the reason why that's important is because all those people, all those families in the communities that were affected are now completely out of water, not completely out of water, but their water supply has completely been affected by this natural disaster. One second. War and conflict. This is a problem because a lot of war parties kind of target communities or villages' water supply to gain leverage over them. So, for example, Ukraine and Russia right now, they're in war, and both countries have significant damage effects from the war. And this is a problem because the water infrastructure that they both possess may have been damaged, and this tactic of using or targeting their water supply to gain leverage is why war and conflict is a big problem whenever it comes to water shortages. Wastewater is very important because there can be copious amounts of water. So if a community has, swamps, rainforests, big bodies of water, or lakes, rivers, etc., they could potentially be used, but a lot of people don't realize that all those big bodies of water, or different rivers and streams and stuff like that, may be unsafe. to consume. So wastewater is usually full of contaminants, and about 80% of wastewater that is used is reused without being put into a process, and this can cause diseases like typhoid, dysentery, polio, etc. Water waste is described as the waste of water. Like, for example, like if you were at a restaurant and you were to get free water, that could be considered water waste because it's not priced appropriately. Leaking faucets, leaking valves is also another thing that causes water shortages. And these problems can easily be fixed just by the pricing of water or simply fixing a leak in your plumbing system. Lack of infrastructure is another big thing. A lot of communities or governments aren't able to afford such things. Lack of infrastructure is expensive in terms of maintaining. So the electricity that's used to maintain this infrastructure is expensive, and then obviously the cost of building the infrastructure for water resources of a community. If you look at a third world country, they're not going to be able to afford these such things. So they have village drills that they can use to pump their water instead of having to walk miles upon miles just for a drink of water or just for their daily water use, like many countries face nowadays. Lack of international cooperation on shared water sources are a thing, or are a big reason with water shortages too, because if two communities or two parties have a shared water source and they both have tendencies that they need to meet, or to basically make their water safe for both sides. They both have their set of instructions of what to do. So if one party follows in these instructions and makes sure the water is safe to drink, then that's good. But if the other side doesn't, then it affects both sides of the water, both sides of the parties, because their water is now contaminated. Inequality and an imbalance of power is important because a lot of people that don't have power lack the voice that they need to make a change. So if a person in a third world country that is needing water doesn't have money, their voice will never be heard. But if you look at someone like Elon Musk or so, he has tons of money, $250 billion net worth. He could easily put an end to such things like this because a lot of people listen to him because he has power. So, or in other words, he has money. Forced migration and refugee crisis is basically if you have two parties or two groups of people. One group of people lives in a big city. That big city is doing good with water resources. They're doing good with water shortages. They're not wasting any water and anything like stuff like that. And then the other group is realizing that their water resources are coming to an end. So that group migrates to the bigger city, which then causes the bigger city to have less water for their community members. And in turn, this causes water problems for that whole big city now that there's a new amount of migration that's happening in the big city. So that's the reason why forced migration and the refugee crisis is a big factor in water shortages. According to Greenpeace, the leading factor of climate change is the production of greenhouse gas emissions, like I mentioned earlier. And according to UNICEF report, almost 75% of natural disasters were water related. So, for example, Hurricane Ian, and then also, different floods and droughts and stuff like that. Leaking faucets, free water at restaurants that is not finished can reportedly make 30 to 40% of a city's water shortage or water loss, according to Shafiquel Islam, which is a water shortage expert. And then According to Leah Schleffler, the population is going to increase 2.3 billion by the year of 2050. And this is important because if you think about it, we just hit the 8 billion mark for the whole world's population. So if you were to add 2.3 billion people onto this, you can see that how much water shortages are going to become more of a problem if they're a problem now. My reason in defense continued is a lot of communities or villages have a lack of technology, and it's just like small cities and small villages can't fund such things. So I also think that there's not enough studies being observed or performed on environmental factors, population factors, and the overall consumption of a certain body of water. So if these, experiments or studies were to be able to be put in place, a lot of, these big bodies of water can be more consumable for the communities that it serves. So my partner is going to be talking about the counter arguments, and then the water shortage solutions, and then also our conclusions. And this is our references. And thank you. Have a good day.